In just the past hour, the Prime Minister said he'll introduce emergency legislation after the Supreme Court ruled the government's plan to deport migrants to Rwanda is unlawful.
I'm also announcing today that we will take the extraordinary step of introducing emergency legislation. This will enable Parliament to confirm that with our new treaty, Rwanda is safe. I will not allow a foreign court to block these flights. If the Strasbourg court chooses to intervene against the expressed wishes of Parliament, I am prepared to do what is necessary to get flights off.
Well, Sunak said he's working on a new treaty which would guarantee migrants would not be removed from Rwanda after the court decided there were grounds to believe genuine refugees could be at risk of being returned to their original home countries. Well, sacked Suella Braverman, who once said it was her dream and obsession to send migrants to Rwanda, launched an attack on her old boss after saying he'd dodged the hard decisions on how to stop the boats. Tonight, she said the government must introduce an emergency bill to block off all routes of legal challenge. And this afternoon, Keir Starmer clashed with Sunak over the controversial policy.
Does he want to apologise to the country for wasting £140 million of taxpayer cash and wasting his entire time in office?
Rwanda is one part of our plan which has already delivered a reduction in the number of small boats this year by a third, Mr. Speaker.
While he was wasting his time on this gimmick, the asylum backlog has swollen to 175,000 people. Taxpayers are paying £8 million a day on hotel bills, and 615 people arrived by small boat last Sunday alone. Plan A has failed.
Well, meanwhile, a former minister has claimed 6 more MPs will be submitting letters of no confidence in Sunak's leadership. I mean, no matter which way you dissect this, this has been a bad day for Rishi Sunak. He looks like a chump. He looks like he can't get his flagship policy through. And I very rarely say that I have sympathy or agree with Suella Braverman, but I do today. I do think that there are elements of what she said in her letter that we know that Downing Street have been briefing all week that they're probably going to lose. They're probably going to lose. So why they didn't have more in place to say how they were going to resurrect this flagship policy, it also just always smacks of trying to say something to the public. Don't worry, dear, we've got it sorted. We've got a plan in place when nothing happens. And, you know, as Keir Starmer said, the backlog is 175,000. And even with the best will in the world, even if they get through all these extra bits, the extra treaties and understandings that they want to get through, there will not be, almost certainly, a flight to Rwanda before the election. And even if they were to win the election within the next year, there might be, I don't know, 200, 300 people flown to Rwanda?
A couple of hundred people.
Couple of hundred.
I mean, the flaw in the system is the kind of practicalities of it. And the craziness about this, the court today didn't rule that the idea was illegal. It was about Rwanda specifically. So you could find one of, I think there's 50-odd countries that were identified as being potentially safe to carry out this policy, and maybe they should have gone there first. What I find a little bit extraordinary about Suella Braverman is that she wrote that letter yesterday, as we discussed on the talk, saying, well, if it works, it's bad. If it doesn't work, it's bad. It's like, well, hang on. You know, you wrote it, mate. You were actually one of the architects of this, so she can't get off scot-free on this.
Either way, we're stuffed, whether we win or we lose.
Either way, we are stuffed, but somewhere along the line, someone's got to find a way of dealing with this. I don't know if Rishi Sunak is kind of trying to double down on the Rwanda thing is necessarily the right way, but the alternative is to say, well, I got it wrong all along.
And I've wasted so much time.
The thing about Suella Braverman's letter is, you know, we don't know the truth of everything in it, but everybody read that letter last night and we thought about Rishi and we thought, yeah, that's him to a T. I thought today in Prime Minister's questions, he really was rattled because he's been rumbled, she's nailed him. And he said, so her big criticism was, you know, we always suspected we might lose the Supreme Court verdict, and you got no plan B. You've just tried to will this
magical
scheme through
thinking.
using your magical
But
thinking.
she supported it.
Yeah, well,
she supported it.
Well,
and
yeah,
it's
but she
gone
didn't
their
start.
way.
She didn't start it.
True,
It's the Rwanda scheme started in April 22.
Agreed.
We've had 3 Home Secretaries there, so you can't blame her for being the architect of this scheme.
But she would have been out today selling the policies.
And she
Well,
said it was her dream.
Well, she said let's leave. She kept saying let's leave the ECHR. He won't do that. Now he says today what he's been trying to do is to give the impression that he did have a plan B. In fact, the first thing he did after that ruling came down from the Supreme Court was he phoned the president of Rwanda and tried to do a quick deal, because the ruling of the Supreme Court is this: you can't trust dodgy Rwanda not to immediately repatriate our migrants to their home countries where they might be
Exactly, which is
persecuted.
illegal.
So Sunak's on the phone saying, "Oh, could we quickly sort of plug that gap and get you to agree that you won't repatriate our migrants? And secondly, we're going to put emergency legislation through Parliament to take these." He didn't have a plan B. Today
none of this washes with voters. I mean, voters will be astonished to think that the entire future of our asylum policy rests on whether or not Rwanda has a decent human rights record. What they want to see is a plan that we can clearly implement from this country and that we can control. And, you know, it's so nakedly obvious what Downing Street was trying to do today, desperately trying to regain the initiative by calling an emergency press conference to create the impression of some kind of urgency, that some kind of dynamism, some kind of absolute commitment to sorting this out. And I'm afraid that Suella Braverman's letter absolutely laid bare the reality here, which is that this has been too politically difficult for Rishi Sunak. It's too sensitive. He doesn't like it. He was hoping that she would somehow make the problem go away. And she has said, I cannot make the problem go away without your backup on number 1, 2, 3 in issues. There are ways of simply flouting the ECHR or getting around it. It's got very boringly notwithstanding clauses that you can introduce. It's actually been done before. I was talking to David Davis earlier today, ex-cabinet secretary. He knows his stuff on this sort of thing. He reminded me of a time back in the early-ish days of the David Cameron administration when there was a ruling from Europe that we had to give prisoners the vote.
Yes.
And we actually found a way of not doing it. So where there's a will, there's a way. Unfortunately, it has been an utter shambles, and I think the judgment of voters will be completely damning.
By the way, whatever happened to David Cameron?
What do you mean, what happened to him?
Talking about withholding the vote from prisoners is one thing. People generally don't like criminals, so that was always going to be OK by the public. Rwanda, this was not Sunak's fault. It was under Boris Johnson and
April
it was actually the Foreign Secretary, Dominic Raab, at the time, who was in charge of finding a country. He was in charge of finding the partner countries. He was given a list of 30 countries initially. All of those countries basically said no. Macedonia, a place like that, said no, we don't want any part of it. Brazil said no, we don't want any part of it. He was then given another list of countries with a wider spread, 47 of them. Civil servants said, Rwanda's on the list, but we don't advise it. Because Raab had said there's 3 things that each country has to have. It can't be a war zone. Rwanda is a war zone. Excuse me. They must sign up to the Refugee Convention. Rwanda is not. And there must be no chance that any individual will have their human rights violated. Rwanda has been doing that for years. So the Tories themselves have known about this for years and have carried on going along with it, knowing that it is not a safe place to send
Because it's
refugees.
just a political symbol. That's what it is. And I can't understand why we couldn't have sent them to one of our own protectorates. You know, we do have a few
The Isle of Wight.
bits of...
That's what I
No, as an Isle of Wighter, I'm not buying it.
That's why I said
And
it.
the Isle of Wight would go nuts. No, but we have other places which are still under British...
true.
Well, I mean, sorry, what about Pitcairn? It's
But
a bit
also-
far away, but, you know...
I mean, they must have been. I mean, the lawyers that sat there today in the Supreme Court are, you know, the best legal brains in the country or in the world, probably. Apparently, you know, they know their stuff, whether we agree with them or disagree with them. And very similar people would have, of similar qualified mind, would have been advising the government beforehand. Somewhere in that chain over the last year, someone must have said, you know, you won't get the Rwanda thing through based on exactly what we're talking about. So think of another way. To be honest, I mean, the wider issue about immigration, we shouldn't even get to this point of Rwanda and this.
course,
We should be dealing with it in a more immediate way, when it's happening or before it happens.
But this is
Turn
the
the
problem with
boats round
so
in the middle
many
of the channel.
these.
Try that one, eh?
Yeah.
But the problem with so many of these
Controversial.
policies is that they are all designed to grab headlines rather than actually reduce the numbers of people either coming through on the boats or speed up the asylum process, which is what I think most people want to see. If that can't be provided because they can't find a way to do it, then they just fall back. And, you know, Braverman, Sunak, they all do it, fall back on a way to say, don't worry, we've got this in hand. Well, they haven't got it in hand.
And this ruling isn't about the way our migrants might be treated in Rwanda. It's that Rwanda cannot be trusted to immediately repatriate them to their home country. So it's not a ruling about how awful Rwanda is.
No, but it is partly.
It isn't.
Rwanda have already sent refugees
That
from
isn't
Israel.
what the ruling was.
But it was. It's not a safe place to send it to. And Rwanda has already demonstrated with refugees they've had from Israel.
It
was part of that.
Yes,
Rwanda has already sent. It's not just repatriating; it's sending them to other countries.
That's what it's about. It's not about conditions in Rwanda. It's that Rwanda cannot be trusted to send these our migrants to other countries.
No, it is both. If you read the ruling, some of it is about refoulement, as the and some of it is about whether their human rights are up to scratch in Rwanda and about. But none of this should have been a surprise.
It's not a surprise.
It isn't a surprise. You know, look, I'm with Kevin on this. I'm afraid that the only way we can resolve this is to turn back the boats. And once you start doing that, and if you do it a little bit consistently, people will simply stop coming. Other countries have done it.
And of course, one of the other options is to throw even more money at it, because one of the ways that we can get around the problems that the judges are saying there is in Rwanda is to send all our own people to Rwanda to process these claims. Well, how much is that going to cost?
What I know.
Last point.
Exactly.
Rishi Sunak had the temerity today to stand in front of that lectern and it said, "Stop the boats." I don't think you did that, and you're not going to. He's unbelievable, this guy. And Suella Braverman has just nailed him, and everybody knows it.
Yeah.
She's the new hero of the Conservative Party. She's got my vote.
Well, that's exactly what she wanted. Coming up.
Is that how low the bar is, Kel?
I know. I'm a big fan of Suella Braverman.
We know, Kevin.